Hello and welcome to the first episode of Plus 50 Agility podcast. And today joining me is my friend John Riley. He is a professional Scrum trainer based in Ohio, United States. I met John through the professional Scrum trainer candidate program, where he is extremely active and supportive. He helps the newcoming folks get into the community, get accustomed to what it looks like, how the training process looks like, and so on and so forth. So I personally, and I know many other people, have received big chunks of support from John throughout 2020 at least. So hi, John, welcome.
Hi, Bogdan. Thanks for having me, and thank you for the kind words. I just know that it's a two-way street. I learn from the candidates too. It's very valuable to get your take on the knowledge that you have. So it's definitely goes two ways.
A bit about your background. I went through your LinkedIn before the episode and found some things that are quite interesting, but we'll get there later, I believe. So you have started far away. Oh my God, it's like so far away. In 1993 as a software developer, and you worked quite some time on different positions of seniority. Then you got to be a Scrum Master and Agile coach. You're also very active in consulting. For many years, you are part of the Ready Set Agile training group company community. And what really struck me as interesting is that you are a voiceover artist with 15 years of experience. So if I left any blank space or gaps in your expertise, please feel free to fill them in. But I'm also quite interested in how did voiceover acting came to be.
Yeah, that's interesting. The IT background and voiceovers seem to be opposites of each other. So the voiceover thing came around when people had said to me that, your voice, you have a good voice, you should record your voice. And so it's just my friends that were saying this. And so, I think, yeah, okay, fine. Then an opportunity came around. We have adult classes here in Columbus where you can just, if you have an interest in something, you can just, take this class. So I saw one where someone who was a recording producer was giving a class on getting into voiceover. So I said, hey, what the heck, I'll take that class. So part of that class was that I would get the producer would record a sample of my voice and critique it. Well, he did that. And then he sent me an email saying, we should continue this. You do have a voice quality that would be needed in the industry. And so I'd like to record a demo for you. So I said, okay, went to Vermont, which is on the East Coast of the United States, where his recording studio is. And we recorded my demo, which was 60 seconds long. And then what I was able to do is I was able to send this demo to prospective agents in the area so that they could represent me. This was just a 60-second demo, but I sent this out to several agents, and one of them responded.
Okay, wait. So you flew all the way from Ohio to Vermont, which is like several hours flight, to make a 60 seconds demo. Sounds like a waste of time. I wonder even how much time did it take you to record those 60 seconds. Probably were a few takes at least.
Yeah, it was definitely a few takes. In voiceover, we do several takes of the same sentence. So this 60-second demo actually took about an hour and a half to 2 hours to make, because the producer was giving me cues to how he wanted me to talk. And the demo itself is actually some commercials that you might see here in the United States from the audio perspective. And so we would do several takes. Like he would say, I want you to say this happy. Now I want you to say the same sentence as if you're surprised. Now I want you to, and so he would go on and on like that. And then he would take my voice and then he would then mix in music in the background to it. So it gave it a different feel. And the thing about voiceover is it's all about perception. Like if you turn my video off, you probably get a different perception of my voice. And, I could talk in a deeper voice and it would sound different. And so he would have to give me some audio cues as to what to do. So yes, it might have seemed like a waste of time to be just 60 seconds. But what he would do is he would try and get the mood together so that it would make the right perception for the audience.
Could it be done somewhere locally in Ohio in a studio?
Yes, it could. It's back then the technology was not what it was today. So
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
yeah, you have to have different equipment if you were to do it virtually. Now I do, since this pandemic has gone on, the voice work that I have done has been all virtual, and there's just one piece of equipment that I use to get all of the visual and audio cues from the producer and director so that we have the correct perception.
Have you ever considered having this as a full-time job, or it was just rather a hobby and never a possibility actually?
Yeah, so this is actually just a hobby. I have considered doing it, and that's still a consideration. I think my passions lie more with agility, just bringing out the learning potential in people. So you went into my background. I've had a developer background, since the early '90s. It's really more about that passion. I mean, what drove me to do what I do in IT is that the idea that as a developer, I could produce something that people enjoyed or people got value. What really drove me to agility was that whatever was put into production was always wrong or always incorrect. The users would say, well, that's sort of what I wanted, or no, that's not what I want at all. That's where I was like, well, wait a minute. Okay, so my point of view is usually not the correct point of view. Then I started realizing that it's more about that shared understanding. It's the understanding from me as a developer and the user, that shared understanding that comes together, and we say, yes, this is what we want. And now let's take it one step further and do the next best thing. So that's really where my passion turned from a developer to more of agility, and agility just took that on. It's that attitude of continuous learning, continuous improvement. You could always do things incrementally, where you can do a little thing and know right away whether, yes, this is the right track, or no, this is not the right track, and let's change things easily. And that's what agility really is about. When I coach people in agility, I say it's about two things. It's about obtaining feedback rapidly and responding to change. That's the purpose of agility right there. Obtain feedback rapidly, respond to change. And depending on how well you can do that, how resilient you are to that, that's how agile you really are.
It's the cost of your potential failure that is incredibly lower when you deal with small bits of work that you can get fast feedback for and understand, hey, I don't need to invest lots of stuff in this because I know no one wants to buy it right away, so why invest even more time? Yeah,
Right.
that's a good way to put it. So one more question I would like to touch. As a guy who started in 1993, which is quite early, what technologies or fancy things did you get your hands on before the whole object-oriented programming came to be? And I assume assembler and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So before object-oriented, I programmed in BASIC and Pascal, and I actually, my career goes before that. My first exposure to computers was the IBM PC, which was this huge a piece of equipment that had something called floppy disk drives, which most people don't even know what that is anymore. But that was our main use of storage, were these floppy disk drives. Actually, the first floppy disks that I worked with were 8 inches, which is more like 16, 17 centimeters. But the thing about these things is that since they were so large, the capacity of them was very small. And so the programs that we wrote were much smaller. I mean, we're talking about a couple kilobytes for, a decent program in BASIC. And the thing is that the PC era really brought computers to the home and allowed people to realize that, hey, there's these machines out there that can do much more than a hand calculator. It was very revolutionary at the time, even though we didn't have a network. We didn't know what a network was. We didn't know what an internet was. It was a time when we could just craft our own programs and be able to just do our own thing on a terminal, very limited graphics, very limited terminal. So it was revolutionary at the time. Now it's, we have emulators that that can do the job so much better. It was a very interesting time.
Do you miss it, or you're happy with where you are now? And
I do kind of. The thing is that time brought in a lot, made things simpler, but at the same time, it also made us realize that there's more complications with these machines. They are very complicated. So yeah, I do miss the fact that, yeah, back then it was much simpler, and I do appreciate the fact that we were able to do so much with so little. Yeah, I mean, I definitely miss it a little bit, but I'm grateful that we have the technology where it is now.
can't disagree, and especially myth in those times when no one was watching you except someone behind your back asking for his turn to play around with the computer. Now it feels like every click is being monitored, and sadly,
There is that, definitely. I have to agree with you there. I'm of the old school thought there, where I disagree with the fact that we have every single click that we do in our own private area, in our own private home, is tracked and monitored and measured. And
yeah, there is a joke going around in here that most of the IT guys who know exactly how internet works, they all have mechanical locks, no smart home technology, no locks on the windows that are not mechanical. So just everything is old school, nothing is automated, nothing is connected to the Internet of Things, because you just feel safer that way.
yeah, I like that school of thought. Sometimes I wish I were in that kind of a small little bubble where I could just be like that.
I'm afraid it's not going to happen, but let's see, maybe
No,
one day.
I agree. I think it's going to head in the other direction.
So let's get serious here. US is one of the hardest hit countries with the COVID pandemic. And I assume that as more and more people are working from home and staying at home for a month now, it has impacted the way that agile community works together, like how you conduct the trainings, how people try to stay in touch and not lose this sense of community and sense of unity. Could you cue us in on how did it happen to you? What tips and tricks you maybe have up your sleeve?
Yeah, so yeah, I have to agree with you. The United States was one of the hardest hit with the pandemic. I think there's several reasons for this. I think originally people did not change their business models. And what I realized right away back in April of 2020 was that I had to change my business model. So I had to go to a more online presence. What I realized then was that, okay, I was ready. I had my classes ready. I had my training and my coaching strategies ready. The thing is that I realized that in the United States, the businesses were not ready, especially even the ones that said that they practiced agility, which I found surprising. Yeah, someone who was saying, "Oh, we're an agile company," and now they're saying we have no idea what to do, and now we're losing money, and now we're relying on the government to supply us with stimulus packages here. Some people were doing it, some businesses were doing it, some were not. For me, I was just ready to continue with my training and coaching business model where I had changed. That said, what I then was realizing was that as people were getting accustomed to the new way of online working and knowing how it affected them, then they were realizing that we need to learn things differently. So it was interesting in the fact that I think that more people were taking on this continuous learning mindset, which was great for me. It was great because people were now taking more online classes, which was great for me, but it was also kind of a shock to me because I was getting so much traffic and I was getting so many people that were wanting to learn more about this Scrum and Agile thing.
So saying you
So
got pretty busy lately.
it definitely got pretty busy. It depends on how you look at it as to how it's affected you. But a change, that's what change is all about. Change is, it could be seen as chaotic or it could be seen as simple, but it's still change. It's changing the way you are doing your daily life. So yes, it was a huge impact, but any kind of environmental change like this, you just have to recenter. And if you didn't take a temperature of where you were, if you didn't recenter, then you're probably going, I've seen that some people just have more and more problems because they're always holding on to that old way. It's like, when that's a big attitude in the United States. When are things going to get back to normal? That phrase to me is just saying, okay, your mind is not in the right place, right? So
Yeah, you're not getting back to where you used to be.
there
So
is no, and we talk about here in the United States about the new normal. There's all that means to me is like, okay, well, we're just going to recenter. Um, so yeah, I think that some of the reasons why we got hit so hard is because we have this attitude of freedom, and we had all the lockdowns just like everyone else in the world. We closed our restaurants, we closed our businesses. So the big thing here is that we have this attitude of money, which for me it's just kind of, I don't understand it. But it's like, okay, well, how's the government going to help me? How am I going to how is the government going to help me, and how am I going to be able to now interact with all of my relatives and friends?
yeah, it's basically when stakes are this high, it's adapt or die. It's all about embracing the change.
Right, right. And some people have adapted by taking more classes and having this continuous learning, and some people are just, yeah, as you're saying, they're dying. It's all about chaos theory.
Yeah. As one character from Game of Thrones would put it, chaos is a ladder. So you have to climb it up. I hope. I hope we'll get there eventually, and the pandemic will go away. But it's still quite some time we have to spend in this limbo.
Agreed.
So you told that you have been having many online trainings recently. Can you tell about how does the preparation look like? So you have set of tools and practices and tricks that you use for the normal in-class 2-day trainings for the PSD and PSF that you teach, but you had to start over at some extent at least and prepare everything that would be as entertaining and involving, but work online with people who are not physically present in the same location. So was that a challenge, or you knew what you have to do right away?
It was absolutely a challenge to go from a live class to a virtual class. You're never going to get the same experience live that you will virtual. That's just something in the PST community that we have discussed, and we all agree that's not the same. That said, there are a couple things that are still consistent with live training versus online training. And the two things that I have realized are that one thing is you have to have some kind of communication channels. So communication is important. So like we're talking here with Zoom across the world, right? That's important. I think what's more important, especially in the Scrum classes and the PSD and the ones that you mentioned, are that you have to have a collaboration tool. The collaboration tools are important because You have an online presence where you can all communicate via online and a texting method, but you have to have some kind of visuals. So one of the first pillar of empiricism is transparency. You have to be able to make all of our work transparent. So what I've done is I've used tools like Mural. It's about drawing and having fun. You can easily create a virtual post-it note. You could easily create a visual. The thing about it is that the visual can be set up however you want it, almost like a physical board. I mean, what's nice about a physical board is that you can put anything on a physical board. You can do it however you want. You know, that said, something like Mural is almost like that, but you can't actually physically draw like you can on a virtual board. A virtual board, you have to have tools like lines and squares and things like that. So it's not as easy as taking a piece of paper and writing something on it, you know, but it's the next best thing. But what's important is that you have something to collaborate with. So those are the two basic tools I use: something to communicate and something to collaborate.
Is it hard to get the attention of students for 2 straight days and 8-hour trainings? Because when you are in the classroom, of course, for someone who has been to PC trainings, it's a non-stop action. You really, at 90% of the time, you're exhausted and happy that the previous thing is over, but then the next one is rolling and you gotta get going, and the time really flies there. It's just unbelievably entertaining and involving. How do you master that in an online class where people are essentially in their pajamas staring in the monitor, and there is something going on in their house, of course, because they are calling from homes primarily, and it's not the same, of course, but how do you still keep them involved?
Well, those are great points. And yes, we have. So to answer the first part of your question, we have taken, for example, a 2-day class like the Professional Scrum Foundations, and we have expanded it to cover more of a 3-day time span. So we had to make adjustments there. And you're right, in 8-hour training, that's impossible for anyone. So we've had to shorten some of the days. So we've had to take some of the 8-hour days and maybe make them into 6-hour days, or even less. We also take more frequent breaks. So for example, we will teach for maybe 45 minutes and then take a 15-minute break. There's more complications, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because usually in a live setting, you have a focused group. You're there for that reason. Yes, you're going to have people are going to have their phones with them, and people are going to be distracted by whatever device that they are taking the training on. There's also, you have to understand that a lot of people are working from home, so you have home distractions. There's a lot more complications that are going on, which means we have to take more breaks and that kind of thing. So we've had to make some adjustments there. To the second part of your question about what are we doing to perfect this, it really comes down to using that empiricism, make things transparent so that you can inspect them and adapt new methods. We've had to collaborate within our very strong PST community to see, okay, well, I had this audience and this is how they responded to something when I took a break after this topic. So, just things like that, where we were able to compare different conditions with the online training versus the live training and figure out what's working for us. So really, it just comes down to experimenting and adapting to other methods.
Yeah, and the good thing is probably that you have a bunch of empirical data because all the trainers are there sharing the knowledge and findings, and you can spot some things that don't work or are shaky before you even consider doing them, which is good. Yeah.
Right.
So empiricism at its best. Next thing I wanted to touch would be the introduction of the new version of Scrum Guide that came out early in November. So there are many changes and all of them are interesting, but I would like to touch base on a few major topics. For example, introduction of a new entity such as commitment and product goal appearing in the new version. It was also quite frequently asked question during the presentation event itself, that if we have a product goal that is set in stone, how are we going to maintain agility? Aren't we supposed to reconsider our goals at times? But now we have to make sure that the whole product backlog appears and is created around this goal that is very centered and is set in stone, basically. How do you feel about it?
So I guess in general, if I were to answer the question about the introduction to commitments in the new Scrum Guide, I would say that in general, I think this is a great idea. There was some question of, in the 2017 Scrum Guide, I always got the feeling that there was a difference of opinion of the sprint goal versus the work, which was the commitment. And I always got the impression that no one understood that, the sprint goal was the thing that was the commitment, and the work behind it was something that just supported the sprint goal and it could change. So I love the introduction of commitments. That said, let's now talk about this product goal and the fact that it is something that is set in stone. I would say that in the spirit of the Scrum Guide, the product goal is it set in stone for the sprint? Sure, it is. But the Scrum Guide does also say that the product goal describes the future state of which the product can serve the target of the Scrum team and the stakeholders. And then the plan to support that is what supports that commitment of the product goal. First of all, with the product goal, I really love the idea that we're actually making that a commitment. There is a goal to this product. What else supports that is that the Scrum teams also have one other item in the sprint planning event that they have to discuss, and that is, why is this sprint valuable? And so if you answer that question, you always have to go back to that product goal, and you have to realize, okay, well, how has our product evolved? Is our product goal still something that has purpose, has meaning, is valuable? And you can always go back, at any time really, and look at your sprint goal, even though it's not going to change, or your product goal, and even though it's not going to change, you can look at it and have it evolve and have it looked at empirically and adapt to the changes that your product has that it has realized. So the Scrum Guide is very careful in the way they word how that is. They don't say that, hey, this is something that you can never ever change. However, they do say you're committed to delivering the value according to this product goal. So I really do like that.
Probably the most controversial thing is that for all the other parts of the Scrum Guide, we have already some experience in practical implementation. We know the tools, the techniques on how to, how to conduct a daily Scrum event, or how to keep a well-maintained and properly ordered product backlog, or how to cooperate with stakeholders, right? But here we have a product goal. We do not know, and there is of course no prescription for how ambitious does it have to be, what tools do you use to make it transparent, how often do you reconsider it, how exactly do you build the product backlog around this product goal, there is so much questions, and probably it's controversial because we don't know yet. We haven't tried out 10 things that don't work for us, and they are going to be individual for each company and for each product even.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, there is controversy around that. The other part of the Scrum Guide that they took out is the practical uses of Scrum. That section's completely gone. That's good and bad, right? I mean, it's controversial also because, the Scrum was designed around the complications of information technology. But now we've opened it up to any industry. We can apply that anywhere. And you're right. We don't have any practical implementations of the framework as it relates to the product goal even. So I think, part of it is we're relying on the community to, come up with those kind of details.
Yeah. I missed the most, frankly, the part that said that Scrum is easy to implement but difficult to master. So that is gone. So now people can start considering it. Okay, it's 13 pages. How hard can it be to be Scrum team? But in reality, it's way harder than it looks like.
Yeah, that didn't disappear. So many times I've seen Scrum implemented poorly, and when it's implemented poorly, you really know. And unfortunately, you take that. In my experience, you've placed, for lack of a better word, you place the blame on Scrum. Well, Scrum is not good because we tried it and it was terrible. So that said, but based on your last comment, yeah, I mean, in some respects, you can say, well, now that we've opened it up to all the industries, it doesn't work for this industry because it was implemented poorly. Well, yeah. Or, it doesn't work because we had this product goal and it didn't work. Well,
Yeah, I get you. I totally get you. One interesting observation that I've read somewhere, I don't recall where exactly, but someone pointed out that the key part of the framework is ownership. I feel that if someone who is implementing Scrum really believes that, okay, this is a tool that must help me solve my problem, not that if I use Scrum, all my problems will go away. It's quite the opposite. All your problems are going to be revealed eventually, sooner or later, and you have to deal with the problems. So the dealing with the problems part is on you. It's not on the framework, or it's not on the hammer to put in the nails. It's on you to use the hammer to get the nail right inside the whatever you're hitting it. So
yeah, perfect analogy there. Perfect analogy with the hammer and nail. I totally agree with what you're saying, and that's never changed with Scrum. Less prescriptive, you're right, and for a reason.
I'd like to ask you, in your opinion, as a guy who has a solid background with software development, what key benefits are there in Scrum framework for the person who is sitting there and writing the code? Like, why would I be interested as a software developer to play by the rules and pursue this road?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Bogdan, because as a developer in this in this today's the way today's work is performed, you really are just not a developer. You just don't develop code and go home. What Scrum brings you is that it brings you the empowerment to make all the decisions on how the increment is produced. Now, that statement alone says a lot because you can then decide on the best tools, you can decide on the best methods, and you can collaborate and get an instant feedback of how you are doing, right? So, the thing about being a developer is you have the talent to be creative. And so I think what Scrum does is it allows you to foster that creativity and to empower the development team to produce the increment how they see it. That said, I talked about that shared understanding. So what the developers create and what the product owner has as a vision of what the increment looks like are probably going to be different. All right. So it comes down to that topic I was talking about before, where I was saying that, oh, it's never right. Well, this framework allows you to, as a developer, know what is right and how they want it to be done, because then you can take it a different way if you want to, and that's where that creativity comes in. You can creatively come up with the solution and know that right away whether it's going to work for them or not. And that's really where your power is that, yeah, hey, I've created something that someone can use, and that's where the power really is.
People these days don't really get or forget about the fact that creating any software product is far more than just writing the code. someone has to come up with the idea, someone has to make a plan on how to implement it, someone has to create the rules, know the domain, research the market, someone has to get customer feedback, someone has to sell it, someone has to I don't know, sustain it. And that there is a whole lot of activity going on, and writing code is just one of them. There are many people that has to do their job well in order for the whole group to succeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing I like to get a development team to understand is this concept of a test first mindset. So what I tell, or the way that I coach teams or mentor teams, is I say, before you go and solving this problem, probably the question you want to ask is, how are you going to test that? Right? That can form your solution. That can tell you, okay, well, this is what the customer wants. You kind of get a level set there of what the customer wants versus how you're going to implement it. And that test first mindset is so important, so that okay, when we're done at the end of the day, this is what we're going to expect. It's going to get your expectations right up front. We want the login page to work like this. So, it's going to then give you that experience as a developer of how you're going to do it.
You don't know if whatever code you have written is going to be useful, interesting, sellable, even hit the shelf in the end of the day, because you're basing your development on lots of assumptions that can only be validated against the market. If there is someone who puts out $5 bill from his wallet and pays for your product, then okay, you're probably doing a good job. Well, if it's one guy, maybe not, but if there are many people who are willing to pay for it and use it, then yeah. I just wanted to point out one thing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. I hope not, because it's be more interesting. Quite some time ago, in response to the Agile Manifesto, the people in the post-Soviet community of software developers came up with their own manifesto, which is roughly translated as the DEM manifesto, and the title is Write the DEM Code. So the premise is like this. There are what do we value, but what do we value more in the Agile Manifesto. But in here, it's 3-step process. Like what is the manager saying? What does the manager really need? And what happens as a result? So I'll just read it through to you. The manager says, we need a productive teamwork. What does he really mean? He means many working hours during each week. What do we do in the result? We write the damn code. If the manager says we want the high quality products, he really means that they want 100% of automated test coverage. And in the end of the day, we write the damn code. If we want to consider the customer feedback, well, we have to be basically customer's bitch at any given time and write the damn code. And if the product has to evolve frequently based on the customer feedback, there are frequent requirements changes and some discussions around the new features. But in the end of the day, we write the damn code, whatever happens. I guess it probably best illustrates that in reality, writing code is just not enough, and people are just glued to this concept that if you wrote the code, then it's a done deal.
Well, first, I love the way that manifesto goes. And, it's, at the end of the day, write the damn code, right? So yeah, and yeah, I think it really illustrates the fact that when you write the code, it's probably not going to be right. I think it's really what it's saying is that you're going to have to go through several iterations of writing this code, right? And it goes to that back and forth, right? Yeah. I love that manifesto. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, you're right. You're run up till the point you're not run. Then you are slightly more right than run, and then eventually, if things go well, you're right. But there is a long way to go there, and it's even harder to stay because after you have hit your fan base and customer base, it's it's another task completely to keep them coming.
Yep. There you got it.
Yeah.
That's Scrum and Agile in a nutshell, in a very concise way. That's what it's about.
Okay, I'll write a really small book about it then.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I'd love to read it.
Okay, so maybe then from good to bad, you have coached many teams and worked with many software developers in your career. What are some most frequent mistakes that developer can do when they work with Scrum or they implement Scrum from scratch, like when there is agile transformation, let's say, to be specific, and people who never did Scrum and have heard about agility from the Scrum coach 5 minutes ago, what should be their focus? What should they try to avoid doing?
In general, I think it goes back to something you said earlier in our conversation about Scrum being less prescriptive. The first mistake you can make is to take someone's implementation of Scrum and making it your own. That never works. It never works, and it never has worked in the teams that I've coached. You have some of these frameworks like, I wouldn't even go in specific, but they have these methodologies, and it just doesn't work because every culture is different. And when you get if you get a country or you get a company or you get a small team of 5 people, you still have a culture. And so your biggest mistake is to implement someone else's implementation of a Scrum or whatever. That's your first mistake. You got to know what works for you. That's from the team perspective. From a manager perspective, one of the first mistakes that I've seen made is to assemble a team of developers that have the same personality, right? So I've seen some people who have said, okay, well, the data that we have says that we're going to have all introverts for our development team. Well, I think, and expect a positive result. So they all go in the corner, they all code, and they come back at the end of the day and they have this code. The mistake that I'm seeing there is that, okay, we are seeing that this is going to be the way to go. And we're not going to change. We're going to have our introverted developers, and our data shown that that's the best way to do it. The mistake is that it's just set in stone. However, if you just say, well, we're going to start by implementing a team of introverts and then measure what happens and get everyone's take on that, now that's more of an empirical approach. So that's a good way to do it, is that, okay, yeah, I'm doing this introverted development team, but now I'm going to take an empirical stance and saying, okay, what can we measure here and how did it go? And can we make changes, right? So it goes from both ways of how some of the first mistakes you can make.
Diversity is desired, not because it's a buzzword or people will tell that you're not diverse enough, but because by imposing diversity, you enable conflict, and from different opinions and cultures and backgrounds, there is something in the middle that's going to be working for a group that is exactly that group and might not work for the group in the nearest room.
Right. That's a great way to put it. Yep.
Okay, so don't copy other teams' implementation, be diverse, promote healthy conflict. There any more?
The other thing about Scrum that might be a mistake goes back to deciding that you are going to implement Scrum. The Scrum Guide even says that Scrum is best for complex situations. Well, how do you know if your situation is complex? Right? So make sure that you use tools that can measure your complexity. It might turn out that Scrum is not even needed. right? And that's where that goes back to what I was saying about a company having a strategy that is totally Scrum. It doesn't work in all situations, and people just have to understand that it's not for everything. It's for a lot of things. It's for complexity, but you might have an operational software team that says, well, we don't like this idea of Scrum and having everything in increments and things like that. We work better in a Kanban situation where the flow is what's important. Great. So one of the worst mistakes you can make is to implement Scrum just because the guys at the top say this is what we're doing. It might not work. It might not. You might want to try something else and measure your complexity.
As you pointed out previously, it's just a tool for solving stuff, but not necessarily every problem in the world can be solved with Scrum. So yeah, that's a good way to put it. Thanks for that. Okay, one more thing that probably hurts myself and many of my colleagues most here in Ukraine is that Ukraine, along with some other post-Soviet countries, has become what is called the nearshore outsourcing destination, where many companies just outsource their software developments because the rates are lower and there is a lot of qualified engineers and workforce that can be easily assembled with very little time and have the knowledge in a variety of domains and technologies. But when it comes to actually properly implementing Scrum, it has been kind of a struggle because in the end of the day, in most cases, there is someone, a product owner or a person who knows how the business works and what the business needs, who is somewhere far away in Europe or United States most of the time. And the person is rarely available. So there is some proxy business analysis guy or proxy product owner that doesn't really have the power and authority to help the team navigate through different whats and whys. So maybe you could suggest a few tricks up your sleeve on how in this situation you can narrow this bridge, narrow down the gap, gain trust, and make sure that absence of this very important person in the team is not as hard hitting as it normally is.
So are you asking how we can get this person who has been distanced somehow from the team to become more involved with the team so that trust is built?
Yeah, essentially, yes.
I think that this comes down to how empiricism is practiced. And the first thing that has to be known is that you have to bring it out. So part of why Scrum is so powerful is that, this could be seen as a conflict or this could be seen as something that, is okay, right? So the first thing is transparency. Make this aware. Bring the awareness to whoever, the Scrum Master, the product owner, the business, what you have to understand how that transparency is realized. You could verbalize it, you could put it on a board, you could go directly to the person, you could make it so that it has some kind of positive impact, right? That's important too. You want to make sure that whatever you do, however you make it transparent, you will do it in a positive manner. You don't want to come out and say, well, this person is totally distracting my work and I can't get anything done because this person is nowhere to be seen. Maybe it comes down to you and the developers getting together and saying, have you seen this business analyst? Have you seen them around? Have you been able to ask them this question? So maybe you can get all the developers to go to the Scrum Master and say, well, this person's never around. We need these questions answered in order to produce the increment, right? We can bring it up in the retrospective, right? Maybe that's the time to do it when, you can ask the Scrum Master, okay, so several people have come to me and said, all members of the team are not present and we need this kind of communication to build trust within our team so that we can produce the increment however it needs to be produced. So I think number one, you have to make it transparent somehow. That said, you have to be able to do it in a way that is collaborative and that you can build upon it and it's not destructive.
Yeah, because you don't want to start blaming people. You want to eventually things to work out. Yeah, correct. Completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I have also observed, and you can tell me if that is a case also in United States culture, that in those scenarios where we're dealing with outsourcing, it's usually a psychology of someone who orders the work and someone who executes it without real connection or something. So I'm your boss, I'm telling you what to do, and I just expect stuff to be done. And the person on the end who is actually responsible for doing the work, who's getting paid for it, might not be as.
So I think what you're saying is that, in the Ukraine, this is this is the attitude. You do something, I tell you to do something, it better be done that way.
Yeah, just like in the manifesto, like your customer's bitch, basically. So customer pays money and you have to make him happy. And it's not necessarily you will achieve customer being happy by doing exactly everything that he says, right?
Right. And I think, I mean, it's the same thing in the United States. I think it's even more obvious in the United States in that you better make that customer happy or we're not going to get any value. We say it in different ways. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that from a customer point of view, you have to collaborate as well. Eventually, you're going to you might be able to get what you want by taking that attitude of dictatorship to dictate to your people, this is what I want, this is what I expect, and you better do it right. The only thing that's going to work really is that you come to a more collaborative stance on it. So when it comes to customer demands, that's still true. You can demand as a customer, this is what I want. However, you also have to be able to articulate what you want to people and be able to collaborate with them. So that you have to have that vulnerability to be able to ask questions, right? Or receive questions, right? Remember what I was saying about agility. The two purposes is to obtain feedback rapidly and respond to change. Know that that feedback that you are giving is being obtained. And if you're taking on this attitude of, I want this now, and there's no other way that we're going to have this, then understand that that is going to have most likely a negative impact on the value that you receive. So, just know that there's repercussions to that. So if you take on it, and also understand that people are not going to trust you if you take on that attitude that, okay, this is the way I am. And eventually you're going to have a shared understanding of maybe what the value is, but you're not going to have a shared understanding of how feedback is obtained and received, and no one's going to stay around for that. It's just that simple.
Would you agree with the thought that it's within your duty as a developer to say no to your customer, to suggest alternatives, to be proactive and search for the ways that you can make things better? And you must be able to say to the customer, no, this is not going to work. Let's try an alternative, or you're moving in the wrong direction, or we can do this quick and dirty now, but you're going to pay for it dearly in the upcoming time. So if you're not speaking up and making this transparent, then you're probably not doing right.
Yeah, I totally agree. So just going back to, saying no, there are ways to say no, right? And, part of that, you can make that empirical. Uh, if a customer comes to you and says, we want to build a website, and you as a developer, you just say, no, we're not going to. See how far that takes you. See, right? I mean, you can make that empirical. But yeah, you are empowered as a developer to suggest alternatives and say, okay, well, And actually, I think it's more of a responsibility for a developer to say, well, okay, we can do that, but here's the risk, here's the cost. Just letting you know that if we go on this path, this is what it's going to cost you. This is the risk that you're going to incur. This is, this is the way it is. And as a developer, I think you do have the responsibility to tell things in a concrete way what your plan is and how you're going to do it. The product owner has, the business owner, the product owner, the customer, the stakeholder has those decisions to say, all right, well, you told me what the risks are. I still want you to do it. Hey, okay, I was transparent with you, and this is going to take forever, and we're going to take several sprints to do it this way, but okay, right? So yeah, it's a two-way street, and people have to understand that it is a two-way street. It goes both ways. As a developer, you definitely want to take an active stance to collaborate with your product owners, your stakeholders, your business people, and not just do things as they tell you, because they've got a different way. They think it's much simpler than it actually is. You know all the complications as a developer, as a development team. They can say, well, we want this menu item on this website. Okay. To them, they just see that menu item. To you, you see all of the complications that go around this menu item. So it's up to you as a developer to make that transparent.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I have a story to tell about a person who is conducting some soft skill trainings in the company I used to work at. It was some time ago, but essentially one of the topics in a series of trainings was called how to build relationship with customers. It was the outsourcing company, so that was the main business models. And one of the statements was that customer is always right, and whatever is happening, you should rather silently obey than be initiative and proactive and do stuff that we have just discussed about. And one of my colleagues who was attending the training and later on told me the story, pointed it out that maybe it's sort of a problem that people see in us someone who executes, but they have expectation of a very professional person that can highlight the risks, help make the trade-offs, and understand the consequences of your decisions. And eventually she slammed him and she asked him to not come to the rest of the training course. So it just illustrates that not enough people are standing out.
Yeah, I understand. We have that same saying here in the United States, the customer is always right kind of attitude, which, and you have to understand as a business owner and as a developer that it kind of makes it a less safe environment. If you're always the demands are being put upon you to implement things a certain way, then your behavior is going to change, and it's not going to feel safe, and people don't want to not feel safe. So that's definitely going to change your attitude.
I'm looking at the clock right now, and sadly it seems like the time is up. Thank you very much for coming here and having this conversation with me today, John. One last question would be, are there any events on your radar upcoming that you would like to give a shout out?
Yeah, Bogdan, I have to agree. It was a great conversation. I absolutely love these conversations. I just love to collaborate and get other people's opinions on this. I have events like this all the time. It's at my website, readysetagile.com. As a matter of fact, we have one coming up, Professional Scrum Developer, which is the actual 3-day intensive class for developers where you could get certified to be a Scrum developer. So, and things like this I talk about all the time. I always have events on my website that are free for the community, and it's really all about community. It's about these conversations that you and I have and that we could share as a community, because we're all humans here, and it's just really nice to collaborate with people around the world to talk about this kind of stuff.
So thank you again, John. It was a pleasure to have you here, and I hope that you all watching or listening to this will stay tuned for the next episode. See ya.